And welcome back to part 2 of the Peter Nygard case. We're going to get into it, but if you haven't watched part 1, definitely go back and watch that. Otherwise, this won't make sense at all.
Terrible, Your Honor. He's really terrible.
1980, like I mentioned, Nygard was actually charged in Winnipeg with the rape of an 18-year-old girl. And the judge ordered that all court proceedings would not be publicly shared. Why? Question mark. Don't really know, especially because the girl was 18, right? Like, she was legal age. So in Manitoba, like, you cannot name someone if they're under the age of 18 as it pertains to a criminal case, especially if they're the victim. But she was 18, so they could have made the situation public even if they didn't say her name, but they chose not to. But months later, like after the case was going to trial, it was dropped because the victim would not testify. The Crown Attorney at the time said that he advised the 18-year-old to go forward with the charge because she had adequate proof, I suppose, to, warrant him actually being charged. But she refused. The Crown Attorney said that we put her on the stand and asked the appropriate questions, but she didn't want to say anything. And to me, it's super likely that the girl was paid off by Nygard, or she was too intimidated to go forward with anything. So the same way that he had called Casey, been like, hey, do you need anything? Like, are you okay? I'm assuming he did that to this girl as well and just kind of gave her enough hush money to where she was comfortable dropping the situation. And that paired with the fact that, like, at this point, everyone in Winnipeg was under his thumb. Like, I don't know what they expected her to do. I don't blame her at all. The situation is just atrocious and it's horrendous, and I feel terribly for her. The reporter who covered the case at the time said that in his office there was a passion pit that had a couch which turned into a bed, and that there was a mirror on the ceiling. So this is something that he loves, and like, we all know what mirrors on the ceiling means, and this man is just giving like very big ego. So like, as he's literally raping girls, he wants to watch himself raping girls. That just makes me want to throw up. To get into Jonna Larsen, and her case kind of occurred in 1980. So Jonna was a young single mother from rural Denmark who came to Canada to try and make her dream of becoming a seamstress come true. And she moved to Winnipeg specifically. So she was a self-taught seamstress and a designer, and she was pretty good at it, and she like wasn't doing very bad on her own in terms of getting her work out there and like her success. She wasn't doing bad, but she wanted to do better, So in January of 1980, she was getting ready to work for Nygard at an up-and-coming company, Tanger, and it was her first day. She was super excited. She had only heard great things, and she was actually hired as a merchandising manager, so she wouldn't be reporting to Nygard directly, and she figured that she would be in minimal contact with him throughout her employment just because he's the boss, right? And she was just a merchandising manager, so like, why would she interact with him type thing. But this same morning that she's supposed to start work, she turned on her radio, only to hear that Nygard of Tanger was charged with raping a girl. She said she remembers sitting there in shock, thinking about like, what do I do next? What am I supposed to do with this information? But she decided to go into work, because she had just been hired. It was paying really good money. She had a daughter to take care of, but also she again figured she would be in minimal contact with Nygard himself. So when she started work that morning, as she walked in, she remembered seeing the walls covered with posters of Nygard, which like those same posters that I was talking about, like, the ones. So she says, and this made me holler because I remember thinking the same type of thing when I was a kid too. Like, she said he looked like an overgrown teenager with his open shirt and his finger in his belt loops, and she remembered thinking that he looked ugly. And I remember like doing the research for the case, and everyone just talked about how good looking they thought he was and how attractive he was. And I'm just looking at all the pictures even when he was younger, and I just don't see it. I don't see it. The man looks a little bit like a gremlin. Like, I don't see it. So She was told, like when she went in that day by her managers, that there was absolutely no truth to the allegations. It was just someone coming after Nygard because he was rich and successful, and this type of thing happened all the time. Like, he was often the target of young women trying to make a quick buck.
You lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God, stop fucking lying.
So she remembers hearing this, and then within 6 months, the charges were dropped. So unfortunately, by the time the charges had dropped, Nygard had turned his attention to her. So Jonna had only ended up working for Nygard for 19 months, and throughout this time, she was screamed at, she was tormented, she was sexually harassed, she was raped, and then eventually fired. So in the beginning, like, Nygard seemed to be very happy with her work ethic, and he took a liking to her, probably because she was young, thin, talented, and very beautiful, but mostly because she was young and very beautiful, right? Those are his kind of two things that he is obsessed with. So she was eventually promoted to the head of design, and she would eventually become responsible for overseeing a staff of about 8 women. So Nygard would always support her ideas, but she says that this support would come at a cost, a hidden cost. Now, she remembers one day in particular, she was doing a presentation in the boardroom with Nygard and a bunch of other male execs when he approached her to model some of her own designs. So of course this was exciting for her, right? This is a brand new opportunity. Like, you like the things that I'm making and you want me to be the model for them. Like, of course. So while she was modeling, like, and she was modeling it for this group of execs, like, in this room, right? So as she was doing so, he went up and touched her breast, and he said, "We have to lift this because one of your breasts is too low." He then would also, like, kneel down to inspect the hem of the outfit, but he would just use this as an opportunity to look up her dress. And this also, to me, it was just like, okay, this solidifies this solidifies what I was thinking about. Oh my gosh, where did my train of thought go? This solidifies what I was thinking about the underfloor cameras at Nygard K. So as time went on, Nygard would make Jonna model more provocative clothing, which would give him a chance to oogle and assault her further. She would always have to try on tight jeans and see-through tops, if not just for him, for a room full of other people, which made her extremely uncomfortable. But of course, she doesn't want to lose her job, so she's going to keep doing what she has to do. So Nygard would also continually make sexual remarks about her in front of the other executives and staff members, and no one would ever say anything, and no one would ever stand up for her, which to me is horrendous. Because if there's a group of about 10 men standing around watching me get assaulted, I'm expecting someone to speak up on my behalf. But for everyone to just stand there and say nothing makes me feel like maybe this isn't that bad, right? You want to minimize your own experiences. You then also want to just forget that it ever happened, but it keeps happening and no one's standing up for you. Just terrible. So Jonna says that she endured the treatment, right, because she needed the money, right? She was a single mom. She had to support herself and also her child, and the pay was good. There was also perks and benefits. So it wasn't just like, oh, I'm getting paid well. It was like, it was all around too good of a situation for her to feel comfortable leaving, especially when she had no backup. And she was alone in Canada. All her family was back in Denmark. So it was really just her she had to rely on. So now on one specific occasion, she was actually asked to make the trip to Asia, specifically where he was sourcing fabric and manufactured his clothes. And these trips would actually take place quite often. Now on this specific trip, she says, that now 40 years later, the specific details are kind of a blur. Like, for example, the cities that they went to, but what ended up happening to her was unforgettable. So she says once that they landed in Hong Kong, she was shown her room by the manager, and that's when she realized Nygard had booked her into the bridal suite. Weird, but she was just like, okay. So when she got in there was chocolate and stationery with her name on it, and it was also connected to another room that was full of food. So she was just in awe at this point, right? Like she had never seen anything like this. And she'd never been able to afford anything like this. So she immediately noticed that a door to Nygard's room was connected to hers. And it made her uncomfortable, and she kind of side-eyed the situation. So she was like, especially thinking about the previous rape charge. So after she noticed this, she immediately went and asked the hotel staff to make sure that the door was locked so that she would be safe, she would be secure. So after she ate, she actually went to sleep because she was exhausted from the trip, right? Like that's a very long flight, and then the time change and everything. So it's just a long day. But in the middle of the night, she awoke, startled, because there was someone in her bed, and that someone was Mr. Peter Nygard. She was about to say something to him, but he put his hand over her mouth and said, "Don't worry, you are a nice girl. I'm not going to hurt you," then proceeded to rape her. She said she felt dirty, like she couldn't do anything in the situation. And he said just before leaving, "Well, this is just it. Don't go to the police. You won't get anything out of it." So again, just hitting home the fact that like he owned local police and also international police, right? Like just everywhere he went, he was protected. But after he finally left, she said she went and she sat in a chair and she just cried. She just sobbed because she didn't know what else to do. She said that she felt that her livelihood was on the line and that she had to keep working on this trip even though she had just been raped. Like this is something horrendous that would cause so much pause and would require a lot of time to truly heal from. But the day after the rape, she actually told a senior executive what happened, and like in detail as she remembered it. And this man had the audacity to say that he didn't remember her ever saying anything, which is just like, why are you covering for this man? Obviously she said something, otherwise she wouldn't say that she said something. So after returning to Winnipeg following this assault, Jonna was not raped again, but she was uncomfortable every single time she had to be around him. Of course, she has to work for her rapist and she has to act like he's not her rapist. So things remained fine for the most part until she got romantically and emotionally involved with a coworker. So it was at this point the verbal abuse that he regularly doled out, it ramped up. So he screamed at her literally all of the time, and it was like she couldn't do anything right. That's how this made her feel. So in July of 1981, she was called to meet with a senior executive, the different one than the one that she had told she was raped. And she was actually fired without explanation. And she said she didn't see this coming at all. She said it was at this point where she realized they were firing her that she threatened to go to the media and the police in order to report the rape. So she went home, that same day, took all her stuff, and she was like, "I'm getting out of here, and I'm gonna go to the media about this because I kept quiet about this for the sake of my employment, and then y'all had the audacity to fire me? Absolutely not." Jonna was not having any of it, okay? But then, later that same day, after she was fired, the two Nygard employees popped up at her house where they told her that they would be shifting her firing to a resignation. And she was then given a letter of reference and $8,000. So again, Nygard is showing a pattern of paying women off for their silence. And he realized that he could not afford for her to go to the media. The police he wasn't super concerned about because he had them under his thumb, but it was the media that he cared about because that could ruin his public image. And that was the last thing he wanted. He wanted to always be seen in the way that he wanted to be seen in. So Nygard denied everything to do with this rape, to do with this assault, and everything that followed, right? And everything that led up to it, because it wasn't just like this came out of nowhere. It was like a slow build for her, unfortunately, of things she had to endure and face on a regular basis. So the lawyer says that it's not true, and he said that for any newspaper to publish such a serious allegation, which isn't true, could only be negligent and also grossly unfair and illegal.
People that like to throw that around. I'm a lawyer. Okay. I pretend to be a lawyer here.
What's really unfair is the fact that this man has continued to assault hundreds of women everywhere he goes without any real genuine consequence. That's what's truly unfair, not this woman speaking out about her experience with this nasty man. So Jonna and her daughter Zita would actually move back to Denmark in 1982 after months of being unable to find work anywhere in her field in Winnipeg. After Nygard fired her, even though it was formally shifted to a resignation, she said that no one dared to speak to her. It was like he put a curse or a hex or something on her. It was just like everyone avoided her like the plague type thing. So she said that she hopes that he is going to pay for some of his bad deeds in his living life. Now, not long after she was fired, Nygard was actually given an award by the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce for outstanding Canadian distinction. And in 1986, he was given Winnipeg's Community Service Award. Ew, but this is important because the city knew at this point, right, about his charges, about his antics, and everything else that came in between. So it's like they were intentionally making it clear that they did not give a fuck about what he did. He made money and he made the city look good and made the city have a good name. So they were going to keep uplifting him. So it's like, how do you possibly move forward after something like that when the city that you live in is showing you like, we don't care that he raped you and we don't care that he raped all these other girls either. Like, we don't care. So she actually wanted to come forward with her story in 1996, and the Winnipeg Free Press was going to publish it, but I'm assuming that under the pressure of Nygard, they killed the story. So the pressure was not only coming from Nygard, but also from a lot of high-positioned Winnipeggers, like business people and kingpins who were friends of Nygard, and they put pressure on the paper's publisher to kill the story. They either didn't believe Nygard did these things, they knew he did it and they didn't care, or they were a part of it as well and they were covering their own asses. But because of Nygard, like, Jonna actually didn't feel comfortable enough to come forward about her experiences until 2020. And she was actually very close friends with another Nygard employee who was unfortunately subject to his sexual horrors, and her name is Dale Dreffs. Dale's incidents also begin in 1980, after she was hired as Nygard's executive assistant when she was only 25 years old, so also quite young. And she said that he had a reputation around Winnipeg for being a very wealthy, good looking, and to me that good looking is always questionable, guy with a rags to riches story, as he had quickly become very successful, right? He had, like I mentioned before, climbed up that social ladder, got to it. So shortly after, though, she began working for him, she actually regretted this decision of hers. And it all began when one day she was called into his office and his living quarters, where he was sitting on the toilet with his pants down. Another day when they were in a meeting, he ran his foot up her inner thigh, which, like, ew. And she says that he was constantly yelling at her. Like, she said she was scared, but the situation overall was just very degrading. It made her a nervous wreck, and he was just overall, like, consistently degrading her. And always, like, sexually harassing her any way that he could. So she was actually working the day that the rape charges were laid, the ones that we had just talked about, where the 18-year-old girl, her name wasn't mentioned. But later, when the case was thrown out, Nygard had actually sent her to go and collect a box of his stuff that had been taken in as evidence. And the box was labeled Nygard rape case. And she said it was terrible to walk out of the building holding this box, knowing that what the girl said was obviously very true and very valid. And she knew this based off of her own experiences with him, but also the experiences of her friend, Jonna. So in 1990, Nygard was hit with 3 different sexual harassment complaints, which were filed with the Manitoba Human Rights Commission, but the records within the case weren't released to the public. They're still sealed to this day. But basically, Nygard paid to settle these complaints. And a local paper at the time was actually able to interview two of the women, and they were able to tell their story, tell their side of what happened, what went down. So one of the women, who was a 27-year-old travel coordinator, said that while working for Nygard, throughout her employment, she repeatedly brushed off his touches, his gropes, and his many sexual advances. Now, the other woman who media spoke to was a 39-year-old communications manager at the time, and she said that Nygard had added skinny dipping to the agenda of their business meeting. Yeah. Yeah. So while they were in the Bahamas, Nygard was wearing a very small swimsuit, like a Speedo, and he was constantly grabbing at himself and his junk, I suppose is what she was trying to say, but didn't say. And whenever she would be called to his office throughout the time of her employment, she would find him half naked, usually with his shirt and pants open, and he would stick his hands down the front of his pants, like rubbing on himself, which, like, just thinking about this crusty man doing this to these women who are just trying to work and exist, it literally makes me want to throw up. Like, it makes me sick. So now we're going to get into April Telek, and her series of incidences occurred in 1993. So just a little bit of background on her. April was born on April 29th, 1973 in North Vancouver, British Columbia. She is an actress and a model. She got her first modeling job at 10 years old, and at 13, she actually got a contract to model in Japan for a year. So she was like very successful from a very young age, and she now has over 100 acting credits. So in 1991, at 18 years old, she met and befriended Angela Dyborn, who is Peter Nygard's niece, and they actually met in her mother's clothing store, so that's Nygard's sister, where one of April's friends worked. So April went in there to see one of her friends and eventually met Angela, and soon they became friends. She said they weren't best friends, but they knew each other and they got along well, so they would hang out. They would do like regular teen stuff, like go to movies, the beach, barbecues, parties, etc. So shortly after they kind of initiated this friendship, Angela moved to LA and she invited April to go and visit her, to which April went. So like I said, they weren't great friends, but they were good enough friends that April was willing to go and see her, and that they stayed in touch after she had moved. So I mentioned she was very successful, even like from a very young age. So at 20 years old, her career was off to a really good start. She had modeled in a TV ad for Gucci. She had modeled for Shiseido Cosmetics. She had also become a spokesperson for Dairy Queen, and she actually won Miss Canada. And she went to the Philippines to participate in the Miss Asia Pacific Quest pageant in 1993. In the fall of 1993, Nygard sent her a large box of free clothes, and she was thrilled, to say the least. Right, like very excited for this designer to be sending her all of these expensive products, for free. She didn't have to do anything to get them. It was just a lovely gift. So in November of 1993, at 20 years old, Nygard had actually called her parents and told them that he wanted her to come to Winnipeg to model his signature line as soon as she got back from the Philippines. She was, of course, extremely excited. It was like one opportunity after the next, right? She felt like this was a very big deal for her career and just for herself at this point. So she was super excited. But she and her family were told that Nygard and his company would take care of everything. So the company arranged her flights, and they told her that she would be staying at the executive suites. What executive suites? They did not specify. They just said executive suites. So it's just like, when you hear that, it sounds really nice, right? And if you're like, oh, I'm going to get to stay in luxury, oof, So she was hyped. She was super excited about it. But once she actually landed in Winnipeg, her friend Angela, right, like Nygard's niece, picked her up and drove her to Nygard's warehouse on Notre Dame, right, in Winnipeg, where he also had an apartment within the building. She was then informed that there was only one suite at this location and that Nygard would be staying there as well. Which is like weird, but she's like, okay, maybe this is the way that they do things, right? She's 20, she's not really sure, and this just seemed like too good of an opportunity to pass up. So after she was dropped off and left alone with Nygard, she tried to kind of talk her way out of the situation, try to get him to take her somewhere else, try to just let her go to another hotel, like just do something. But everything escalated very quickly. She said that he immediately pulled out his penis and he said that he wanted April to give him oral. She begged to leave, but Nygard said she couldn't because he didn't want her to tell someone. He then flipped her around while trying to rape her while she was fighting, and she was actually able to get away from his grasp, and she got to the door trying to get out, but then she realized that it was locked and she had no way out. She said she didn't want to be killed, strangled, or beaten, and so she realized she had one of two options, right? She could fight or she could not fight and kind of let it happen. And one of the options would kind of guarantee her a greater chance at survival, right? So she did what was necessary for her survival at this point because no one knew where she was, so no one could help her, no one could get to her. So, like I said, no one had heard from her, right? So after not hearing from her daughter, her mom, Jackie, called the RCMP to report her daughter as missing. She said it was such an awful day and such a terrible experience, right? You just let your daughter go somewhere for the first time, you know, with this man. And like I said, there had been whisperings, there had been murmurings about him, but they were like, no, he's a good guy, you know, like trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, I guess. Which, when someone has a rape allegation, there is, or more, I can't even say one, because he had multiple rape allegations at this point. There's no giving them the benefit of the doubt. But Nygard had actually held April captive for days while he drugged and raped her. So after about 3 days, Nygard had held her captive for days while he drugged and raped her. So after about 3 days of this continually, right, horrific, absolutely horrific, while Nygard was sleeping, she snuck to the bathroom because she knew that he kept a phone in there. So she called someone she knew in Winnipeg who was also related to Nygard, who said that he would do whatever necessary to come and get her because he knew what his relative was about. So as she went back to the room, she grabbed her bag, threw on a coat, and left very quickly. And she realized that a key had been left in the door, so she could actually leave, right? Like, it wouldn't be that crazy for this guy to try and come and save her, right? She was able to just actually exit the building at this time. So she quickly found herself in a dark and empty warehouse, right? Like, it was the middle of the night. So the security guard found her, and he was trying to return her back to where Nygard was at, but she was eventually able to convince him to just let her go, you know, which thank God for that. And when he let her out, she was alone. It was on the street. She was barefooted. She was wearing absolutely nothing but a jacket, and it's January. So, like, it's cold. It's so cold in January in Winnipeg, like, so extremely cold, like, ridiculous. So not that long, though, after she was able to get out of the warehouse, her friend did arrive, and he actually drove her to his house. So once she got there, she called her mom, and her mom called the RCMP, who then sent the Winnipeg Police Service to check on her. The man who picked her up also later said that when she was picked up, she was fully clothed, she was composed, and she had made no mention of being raped, drugged, or held captive by Nygard. Now, this is obviously a lie, and this was what he had to do in order to protect his family and not be persecuted by his own family, because Nygard's reach at the time was literally, like, so wide, so vast. So after she was able to escape, and she was safe, she actually told her friend what had happened in hopes of receiving support. But instead, Angela told her that she'd watched the tapes and she didn't think that April fought that hard. Disgusting! April says that she felt threatened by Nygard and she was too afraid to tell anyone else about what he did to her. She suffered horrendous nightmares of the incident for literally decades after. But the nightmares finally ended when she had a dream that she beat Nygard up to the point where he wasn't able to get back up. And she says that the dream in part gave her the strength to come forward and tell her story. So after she had arrived back home, April and her parents met with an RCMP officer named David Whalen. Fearing backlash from Nygard, her family advised her not to report the rape, but she did tell David, like the RCMP officer, that she was held against her will. David now confirms this story, and he said that at the time he thought there was more, and he thought that she may have been sexually assaulted, but he didn't press things further. Which is like, this is exactly why the police are so useless, because if you think something happened and you're not going to press further, but you're not going to investigate further, like, literally, if he had been stopped in this moment, so many things, like the next 16 pages of notes, would not have been able to happen. So it's just ridiculous and infuriating to me that he's like, yeah, I knew something happened, but I just didn't do anything about it. Like, why are you admitting that? You should be ashamed. Are you not embarrassed? In 2020, April actually filed a lawsuit against Angela for being a key conspirator with Nygard and a key cog in his vast sex trafficking network that ended up playing a role in her rape and confinement. She says that Angela played a large role in everything, and it's not okay. Like, she has to be held accountable. So in the lawsuit, April says that Angela was paid salary, travel, and lodging in exchange for her participation in everything. And in order to receive these benefits, Angela continues to conspire with Nygard to cover up everything that he's done and everything that she knows of that he's done. So Angela was actually responsible for facilitating travel arrangements, lodging, and benefits for Nygard's girlfriends. And she would regularly transport victims to doctors who were also on Nygard's payroll so they could receive abortions and treatment for STIs in secret. Angela, of course, denies everything, and she gave her own version of events, right? And it's very far off from what April said, which lets me know, like, Nygard just told her to lie. Because there's no way that two people are going to have such completely different stories unless you're just trying to protect yourself and obviously protect her uncle. So Angela claims that she and April were never close. She says that they briefly met through April's mom at a store that she was managing at the time. And she says that April's mom was fascinated with her uncle, Peter Nygard, and his clothing line, clearly aware that Angela was in fact related to him. She says that April's mom had been trying to secure a clothing sponsorship for April through Angela. And she said that she did not follow up with April or her mother regarding this opportunity because that was handled by the PR department of the company, had nothing to do with her. She also says that April never went to visit her in LA and that she also wasn't even in Winnipeg when April says she drove her to the warehouse. She says that she never recruited models for the company, and she wouldn't have told April that Nygard wanted her to model for the company. So basically she just lied, but this lawsuit is still ongoing. Nygard was actually sued again in 1996, but this time it was by an LA-based employee, and she said that she was forced to spend the night in bed with him and forced to engage in sex. After the first incident happened, she rejected any further advances, and because she kept rejecting him, he just fired her. But this lawsuit was dismissed for unknown reasons, so it's not known if she settled outside of court or if she decided to just withdraw the case. It's not really clear. So now we're going to get into these pamper parties and kind of what they are, how nasty they were, and why they were called this. So these were parties that Nygard routinely held, right? He routinely had them. It was like at least once or twice a week and in varying locations. But the women would be invited to these parties and they would be deceived about what their involvement was, obviously, because if they knew they were going there to be assaulted by this old man and his old friends, like obviously they wouldn't turn up, they wouldn't go. but they think that they're just being paid to hang out with them, just being paid to look pretty, just sit around and be pampered, right? Hence the name Pamper Party. But in reality, what was happening was they're going to be paid off for their silence about whatever he did or whatever his associates did to them, whatever they wanted, and for however long they wanted as well. So during these parties, the women would be ranked based on their physical appearance. They would be ranked A, B, C, or D. And he said that, Nygard himself said that if a woman or girl had a big round booty, then they were automatically an A. So he told all attendees to wear clothes that were as revealing as possible, as tight as possible. Like, it's best if you just basically showed up not wearing very much clothing at all. So if you did show up wearing clothes that he deemed to cover too much, you were then given different clothes to change into, which usually consisted of skimpy swimsuits, small tops, tiny skirts, so you could use those floor cameras. Men were not allowed into these parties unless they were from what he called high society. And to recruit for these parties and to recruit for other victims, he used known and unknown networks of associates, other victims, as well as his own employees, like Nygard employees, ones that worked for him personally, but also ones that worked for his company. So, like I mentioned, these parties would usually happen at least once a week on Sundays, but other parties would happen throughout the week as well. Sundays was just like the day that they would be the biggest. So the rapes took place during or after what Nygard called pamper parties in his homes in the Bahamas and LA, and he would often transport women from these parties to his varying residences via private plane to Winnipeg, New York, Toronto, and China. So his staff were actually instructed to go out there and recruit young women for the weekly parties to make sure that there were enough women. So when the guests checked in, they were entered into a database and they were ranked, right, using A, B, C, or D. And pictures were sent directly to Nygard to review of the women. So it said that at the time he would select his potential victims for that night, like right when they sent him all of the images, and he would rate them and pick who he wanted. And the lawsuit states that Nygard had a database of over 7,500 girls, right? So they're under the age of 18, and also women. If the women had agreed to sleep with Nygard, which it's not really them agreeing because it's coercion, right? This isn't something that they willingly chose to go there and do. This is something that like they got there and they're like, so are you gonna do it? Are you not gonna do it? So if they agreed, then they would be paid afterwards. And if they didn't agree, then they would be forced to drink. They would have drinks shoved down their throats. The drinks would be laced with cocaine or ecstasy or some sort of other drug that gave the men full control over them. And they would then be taken away from the rest of the group and they would be raped, assaulted, and then paid hush money. So either way, you were getting paid. It's just, are you going to give up and let it happen, or are you going to fight and it's going to happen anyway? There was no really like, it's not going to happen. You're going there for a pamper party. If someone likes you, you're being raped. And that's just kind of the end of it. So Nygard kept these girls coming back because he would give them monthly allowances, gifts, free travel, dental work, plastic surgery, as well as immigration assistance and even abortions. So he was able to put, and he called them his girlfriends. That's what he called his victims, I guess, to make him feel himself, right? Like feel better about what he was doing, but they were not his girlfriends. These are his victims, right? So, but because he had such, I want to say affection. Affection's not the right word. Because he wanted to control them, that is what it is. He put them under the Nygard company payroll by saying that they were models or his personal assistants. So that's how he got away with using company money to pay off his victims consistently. So also, once you were considered to be one of his official girlfriends, he put them under constant surveillance and they were not allowed to leave the home without permission. He even controlled what they wore, how they styled their hair, and their outfits. So Beverly Peel, who was a supermodel, says that women were held like prisoners at these parties. She said it was like pussy casting, like a bunch of girls parading around for Nygard to pick from. He'd promised them modeling contracts and campaigns in New York, and he would then disappear with two of them, and then he would come back and say, okay, okay, who's next? So it's like, even though he would pick his victims, it wasn't like he was just picking one or two. He was raping like as many women as he could at these parties consistently. So Beverly also said that he would collect passports, and then you would just be stuck at Nygard K. And then you would be locked inside of rooms that had codes, and you wouldn't know what the code was, so you wouldn't be able to get out. So you were literally like locked inside. And Beverly actually signed a 3-year contract to be the face of Nygard in 2003, where she was sexually assaulted, like she was raped, and he actually impregnated her on the first day of her contract. Yeah, just horrific. So she said it changed her demeanor. Before, she was able to only see the good in people, and now she was only able to see the bad. She said that once he made her watch him have sex during a business meeting. So they were talking about the creation of her own line, like business related things, and then girls would come in, and then he would literally like, it's not clear if this was consensual or if these were others of his girlfriends, right? So he would sleep with the girls in front of her, like have sex with them right in front of her while he's still talking to her about business.
Disgusting!
She said that Nygard does not understand the word no. In his world, no means yes, right? There was never a time where he couldn't get something that he wanted, and he didn't act any differently when it came to the women that he assaulted. So in a documentary about Nygard's assaults named Unseemly, Nygard raped dozens of women. He would intentionally impregnate them, and then he would force them to get abortions so that he could collect the stem cells from the fetus. And this was really weird to me, and I was like, this is like some conspiracy stuff, but it wasn't really, because this was a huge reason of why he was so involved in the 2012 Bahamian election, because that man who got elected as president, prime minister, I don't know which one it is, in the Bahamas, but he got elected because he promised that he would pass whatever stem cell laws Nygard wanted. Nygard believed that the use of these stem cells would keep him young, keep him fresh, as he continued to age like rotten cheese. So overall, though, the Pamper Parties were known for their free food, their free drinks, and spa treatments. and they would primarily happen in Marina del Rey, California, and the Bahamas at Nygard K. So in the Bahamas, Nygard built a pleasure dome in the form of a Mayan temple and a disco area, which featured a stripper pole. He would also host sexual swaps with friends and business associates who would bring a date to trade for sex with one of his girlfriend's victims. The girls and women who were brought there, they were not informed that they were being brought there for the purpose of sex or being traded for sex, but they would be pressured to comply through manipulation, degradation, and threats, which obviously you're going to be intimidated by these men who hold significant amount of power, and they have a lot of money as well. So these girls would actually often be brought to swingers clubs in New York City, Miami, Los Angeles, and Winnipeg. Yeah, Winnipeg as well. So he would routinely pressure the girls into sleeping with other men so he could sleep with whoever he wanted once he got there, right? He just wanted to pawn them off. He wanted to rape somebody else for the night. So the girls, even when they would be brought back and forth for these swinger clubs to these swinger clubs and at these swinger parties, they weren't allowed to leave, and they needed his permission to literally do anything. And this was a rule that was enforced by his own employees. So if they caught you kind of sneaking out, like, they're gonna snitch on you. So it was like he had his own police as well, which is a very horrific concept because he also had the police on his payroll. So it's like if you wanted to get away, there was no way for you to actually get away. So Nygard consistently referred to his victims as girlfriends and made everyone do so despite how young some of them were, like literally 13, 14 years old, being called girlfriends, dating this man who is literally old enough to be their grandfather. So the Pamper Parties began consistently in 1995. So that's basically as soon as he started to climb the social ladder. And his pockets were completely lined, and he also lined the pockets of his buddies. So the year this happened is kind of unclear, but if you were in Nygard's capacity, or I shouldn't say his capacity, if you were anywhere in Nygard's reach, then like you were likely going to be assaulted. That's just the type of person that he was. And it was very unfortunate for all of the women who worked for him and didn't know, or knew and couldn't do anything else because they needed the money, right? They were reliant upon it. So his ex-housekeeper, Maridel Carbuccia, said that she was drugged and then assaulted by Nygard. She remembers that her vision one night was getting very blurry, and she was all of a sudden just like very, very dizzy and like lightheaded. She remembers she couldn't feel her hands, and she was hearing him talk, and as she was hearing him talk, she remembers that she couldn't function anymore. Like she couldn't control her body. She couldn't control her movements, right? So she was trying to get up and get away from him, and she couldn't. She said that Peter was just on top of her, and she kept trying to push him away. She kept thinking, like, Peter, get off of me, what are you doing? But she couldn't verbalize anything. She couldn't fight back. And when she woke up the next morning, she was there by herself. No one was around, and there was money beside her. In 2006, he actually was facing a series of tax issues with the government of Canada, which the irony, right? Like you have so much money, so like taxes shouldn't even be a concern for you literally at all. But after moving to the Bahamas and staying there for at least 6 months out of the year, he claimed to be a non-resident of Canada, and he claimed that as a result, he wasn't required to pay taxes on income generated outside of Canada. Now, he was making a lot of money outside of Canada because, like I mentioned, he had a bunch of stores across North America, and he also had a lot of varying business dealings in America as well. So he was just, and then also like China and all those other places. So he's just making a lot of money from like varying sources. In 2006, the tax ministry challenged Nygard, and they challenged that notion by letting him know that he actually owed an additional $15 million in taxes, which, again, I feel like that's not that much for this man. He could have paid that with ease, but he just didn't want to. So Nygard contested the assessment, and he said that he had cut residential ties with Canada in 1985, as he had been primarily living in the Bahamas at this point. Now, this was a lie, because for the majority of his life, he was still spending at least 6 months in Winnipeg, Falcon Lake, or just Canada in general. But he never did end up paying any additional taxes, so he just got away with that as well. Remember his crusty girlfriend? The last person who Peter was in relationship with was Suelyn. So Suelyn was born on May 18th, 1989, and she often goes by the nickname Sue. So she is a supermodel, former Playboy bunny, and video vixen. And she can be seen in R. Kelly, Chris Brown, Snoop Dogg, and Red Hot Chili Pepper music videos, amongst many others. And she's also an actress, previously appearing in Video Girl, Dysfunctional Friends, and Still a Teen movie. Now, the time that I'm doing the research for this case, she has millions of followers on Instagram, which her and Nygard used to their advantage for all of the sickness that they had going on. How her and Nygard actually met is extremely unclear, but they have been photographed together as early as 2007. So a hot minute, right? But shortly after that, that they were first photographed together, she became his favorite girlfriend and also recruiter. And she acted like his madam, you know what I mean? Like finding a consistent flow of young models and impressionable women to be raped, sexually assaulted, and sexually battered by Nygard. So she was setting them up, you know? So for at least 5 years, she lived in Nygard's Marina Del Rey compound in LA, and she received cash, a salary, jewelry, plastic surgery, stem cell injections, and cars in exchange for her twisted services, and she herself also had to sleep with Nygard, which is unclear if she really wanted to or if she just did this because she wanted the things that he would provide for her, the lifestyle that he could provide because of the excessive amounts of money that he had and the excessive connections in which he made over the years. So on October 22nd, 2020, a former victim of Nygard's and Sue's actually filed a lawsuit against Sue in the state of Florida. So the woman, who was now 29 years old, had actually fallen victim to Sue when she had fell victim to Nygard, sorry, because of Sue when she was only 18 years old. So the girl had been a longtime follower, admirer, and fan of Sue after seeing her years ago in a Chris Brown music video. So in 2010, she decided to just like leave a little message to Sue on Twitter. Not thinking she would respond, just like, I just want to tell you how much I love you, how much I admire you, how much I look up to you, how much I want to be you. Like it was on that type of vibe. So Sue actually followed her back and replied to her message. And she said that she was freaking out and she was so excited because she thought that Sue was just extremely beautiful and amazing and she just wanted to be just like her. So to have the opportunity to speak with her and be friends with her was like blowing her mind at this point. She never thought that the opportunity would present itself. So the pair would go on to speak pretty consistently, and in one of their conversations, Sue had actually invited this young girl to a party in Miami. So the girl went, of course, right? Like, who's going to pass up that opportunity? So she went and she had a really, really good time. And after the party, she was asked to go to a fashion designer friend's private island for a fun party weekend. A setup, right? So she was told by Sue that they would fly her out and it would be amazing, that there was just so much to do, jet skis, parasailing, and she told her it's a billionaire's private island. So it's luxury, honey. You're going to be living the life you've always wanted. So of course, the girl accepted, you know, and trusted her, and she was thrilled. She said she thought she was getting an insight into the celebrity lifestyle, and she thought that since she was now connected with Sue, she would also become a celebrity, right? This is just everything she had always wanted, and she was finally happening for her. Once the pair actually got to the island, this young girl was told why she was in fact actually there. And Sue told her that she had to have sex with Nygard. It wasn't up for discussion. It was a requirement of being on the island and being on his property. Sue told her that she shouldn't worry because sex with Nygard wasn't that bad and it would be really fast and easy.
What the hell is even that?
So obviously the girl did not want to do this. She told her, I don't want to do this, but Sue was like, you don't have a choice. You have to do it. So the pair then went upstairs to a bedroom where Nygard was in the room, and Sue eventually left her alone with Nygard. So Nygard wastes no time, right? He immediately pushes her down onto the bed and holds her down as she verbally, repeatedly is telling him, like, no, I don't want this. This isn't okay. And he proceeds to rape her. So the next morning, he gave her $500 as payment for the rape. And because of this incident, she suffered physical, psychological, financial, and reputational harm. She felt like she couldn't breathe, and in that moment, she says a lot of her light and happiness was, in fact, taken from her. Sue, of course, denies all involvement and says that the claims are simply not true, which is ironic because in August of 2019, she went out to see Nygard at Falcon Lake, Manitoba to do damage control because they knew that the authorities were finally on their asses after everything that they had done, right? So they were coming up with what their story would be as things started to go downhill. So at the time of these meetings, Sue was told to lie and say that she was always with Nygard and she was always with him for extended periods of time so that she could act as his alibi. And she returned to Winnipeg once again in June of 2020 to further establish the lies that they would tell. And the lawsuit against her was eventually stayed, and the judge said that it will remain that way until Nygard's U.S. charges are dealt with, which we'll get into those charges in a minute. But Melissa Howe, also a former Playboy bunny, as well as Lil Wayne's ex-girlfriend, was another person scouted by Sue with the intention of, you know what I mean, them eventually being raped by Nygard. So Melissa dated Wayne from 2017 to 2019, and so she was running in that elite circle at the time. So in April of 2017, she was shooting a music video in Hollywood when Sue approached her and invited her to Nygard's mansion for his infamous Pamper Parties. And she, of course, accepted the invitation because it sounded like fun. Like, who doesn't want to go and get pampered for free? You know? So when she did pull up to the Marina del Rey Palace, she found 10 other young models, like all very young, very beautiful. There were chefs around, like serving food, and there were about 7 beauticians who were giving manicures and pedicures, so full service treatment. And as she was getting a manicure, Nygard came up to her and talked to her. He said hello, and he mentioned that he liked her accent because she's from London, so she has a British accent. And not too long after she arrived, Sue started to push alcohol on all of the women. And she had like a lot of tequila shots. Melissa said like a lot. And she was trying to say everyone like, come on, let's drink, let's drink, let's drink. But Sue herself, she wasn't drinking like at all. But she was trying to get Melissa and another specific girl drunk. So Melissa made it very clear that like she's not a drinker, but she was continually offered drinks by Sue. So after being at the party for a couple of hours, Sue then tried to get her to join Nygard, who was alone in his bedroom. She says as soon as it got dark outside, Sue told her, hey, Peter wants to talk to you, go upstairs to his bedroom. Melissa to herself was like, what the fuck? Time to get out of here. So she doesn't say this though to Sue, right? She just says it to herself. But then Sue keeps trying to push her to go up and leave her alone with Nygard. And she wasn't comfortable at all with this, like at all. She said she knew the situation was extremely sketchy, was extremely dodgy, and she needed to get out of there for her own safety. So now being the girl that she is, when Sue wasn't looking, Melissa was able to find an escape route. And she said she knew she had to get out of there because she felt like something bad was going to happen if she didn't. It was like a gut instinct she had, and so she followed it. And she was lucky enough to not have been assaulted by him. But if she hadn't followed this instinct, like she most definitely is aware and she knows that she would have become one of Sue and Nygard's many victims. Now in 2011, and we're going to talk about Bianca McKinney. So Bianca was the sole plaintiff on a lawsuit that was filed by Michael Artin in 2011. And she said she didn't know anything about the suit until a year after it had been filed. And she said she didn't know that she was the sole plaintiff either, also until a year after it had been filed. And she said that it put a huge target on her back. Now, Bianca was a model for Nygard, and in 2011 this lawsuit was filed against Nygard, and in the suit it said that she was held hostage by Nygard against her own will and wishes, of course, and this happened in the Bahamas during a shoot. Bianca says that she believes that she was used as a pawn in the feud between Louis Bacon and Peter Nygard because of the filing of this suit. So the suit was filed, right? And she says it was done against her wishes, and she didn't okay the suit being filed, and so it was dismissed only 6 months later, which didn't make a whole lot of sense because she said she didn't know anything about it until a year later. So how is it that you knew about it a year later, but then it was dismissed 6 months after? But it was eventually dropped because there was insufficient prosecution. What that means, I don't really know. That's just what it said. But Bianca herself, she says that she tried to get to the bottom of everything after she learned about it all in late 2015. But after the suit was filed, her home was vandalized with racial slurs, swastikas, and pictures of penises. And black N-word bitch and swastikas were spray painted all over her home. She says she was shocked to learn that she had sued Nygard in 2011, and the lawyer, Michael Artin, who filed the lawsuit, admitted that he had in fact been this is allegedly. He said that he had in fact been working for Louis Bacon to advance his vendetta against Nygard, and that was his response when she confronted him. This to me is very sketch because this is like the exact wording that Nygard himself uses, so I really doubt that this is what really happened. But when Artin was contacted about the incident himself, right, aside from what Bianca says, he says that the complaint was dismissed because she couldn't afford to go forwards. He claims that she said it was a good idea via email, so there's paper trail of it, and he also denied ever working for Louis Bacon. Bianca's lawsuit, like, she now filed another lawsuit, and she accused Artin and Louis Bacon of vandalizing her property in an effort to intimidate her. The initial lawsuit filed against Nygard had claimed that Bianca was required to escape from Nygard's compound in the Bahamas and she had to seek police assistance in order to hide from Nygard because she wasn't supposed to get out, right? But she then, after all of this happened, right, she claimed that none of this occurred, and she went on a public campaign tour to outline how Nygard wasn't responsible. Now, it is possible that this was done in an attempt to protect herself, as it can be intimidating and very dangerous to be the only model named in a suit, especially being a Black model, right? Like, it's super intimidating. But she now claims that nobody was held hostage, but this was all a lie that was made up and created by Louis to take down Nygard. Obviously, that is not what really happened, right? This is the truth that Nygard made up and put out there, or encouraged her to put out there, or forced her to put out there for the sake of her own livelihood, right? She then filed a lawsuit against Louis Bacon in 2016, which, if she didn't have the money to go through with the first lawsuit, where did the money come to go through with the one against Louis? From Peter Nygard. That's the answer. It's Peter. In this lawsuit, she says that her previous lawyer was not respecting her interests, but at the time she thought he was, and that he would keep client attorney privilege. So she did disclose to the lawyer and his personal investigator of highly private, highly confidential, and intimate personal information and details of her experiences traveling with Nygard in complete confidence of that client attorney privilege. This quote was out there in a statement, and this is like literally, this is exactly what it says. Louis Bacon, founder of More Capital Management and a billionaire with purported ties to the Ku Klux Klan, is perversely obsessed with his neighbor, apparel mogul Peter Nygard. Over the past decade, Bacon has engaged in a vicious and unrelenting smear campaign against Nygard, routinely filing lawsuits against him with completely unsubstantiated and over-the-top allegations, all in an attempt to ruin Nygard's reputation. This whole quote, to me, makes it very, very clear that, Nygard put her up to this. Those are exactly the words that he would use. But essentially, Louis does have more money but Nygard is more connected in the areas that affect her and her career, right, as a model. So of course that can be more intimidating. But this quote from her new lawyer also makes it very clear that like Nygard put her up to this. So it says that the litigation has always been about a billionaire investment banker intentionally harassing, intimidating, and stalking a poor, disabled Black woman to further his selfish vendetta against another billionaire. These are literally the exact words that Nygard himself uses throughout his own postings, and he has a website, his own website, defending himself and saying that all of the stuff that we're talking about is fake and it's all made up by Louis Bacon. So this basically just solidified my suspicion that like Bianca, this isn't what she wanted to do. She felt like she had to backtrack for her own safety, for her own protection, for her own livelihood, right? At the time, right, 2011, Nygard still had a lot of power, and so he wasn't someone who you wanted to publicly go up against.
And that brings us to the end of part 2 in the Peter Nygard case. Tune back in for part 3 where we discuss his downfall and everything that followed afterwards.